Thank you very much, Ralph. This was kind of an awesome moment. You know, you could get nervous at a thing like this. Distinguished members of the Hall of Fame, congratulations to Lefty, to Scooter. Delighted we're honoring the memory of Leo DeRocher and Wendell Smith. What a marvelous afternoon. My special thanks to the members of the Ford C. Frick Committee, the gentlemen who cast the votes. I remember so vividly back in '78. It was the late Chub Feeney who had the idea of a special wing at the Hall of Fame for baseball broadcasters. And I was fortunate to sit on that very first committee, and I had the privilege of voting for Mel Allen and Red Barber, and stayed on the committee for a number of years. I remember the late Bart Giamatti said to me, "Bob, would you enjoy being considered for the Hall of Fame?" I said, "Are you kidding?" He said, "Well, you have to get off the committee. We don't elect people that are sitting on the committee." I said, "Consider my resignation." It has been such a wonderful, wonderful baseball ride. I asked my wonderful friend Ralph Kiner to talk about my brother Jack. I was afraid I couldn't handle that part. We lost Jack in 1980, and Mayor Pete Wilson of San Diego led the movement to rename the stadium San Diego Jack Murphy Stadium. So you can understand my emotional involvement with that. The big league trail for me began in 1954. What a wonderful, wonderful ride it has been. It was Curt Gowdy, a Hall of Fame broadcaster, who invited me to come on board. If you're going to hang around for a while, you got to get lucky. You've got to be with wonderful people, and there are so many wonderful people in baseball. I got to Boston. There's Tom Yawkey, Joe Cronin, Curt Gowdy, and so many others. And the first thing Gowdy said to me was, "Kid, you came up here from Oklahoma wearing a cardigan sweater, cowboy boots, and a cowboy hat. I've got a little work to do on you, I can see that." He said, "Another thing I want to tell you," he says, "you ain't seen nothing yet until you see Ted Williams." He was right. That was the year that Williams broke his collarbone in spring training. He missed about the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season. I chatted with Al Kaline about this a few minutes ago. He finally played for the first time after pinch hitting a doubleheader in Detroit. He went 8 for 9, hit 3 home runs. The only time that they got him out all day long, Hall of Famer Al Kaline climbed the right field fence and stole a home run. Yeah, he was right. Ted Williams is certainly something special, as are all the members of the Hall of Fame on the dais here today. In 1960, I went to Baltimore, and here again I really got lucky. The general manager, no more wonderful man in all of baseball than Lee McPhail. The Orioles were coming into their own. They had a young guy out of Arkansas breaking in at third base. His mentor had been George Kell, a Hall of Famer. This young man would set the standard of excellence for third base play, and if you're a broadcaster, you can imagine the thrill of watching him night after night. Sitting on the dais today, of course, is Brooks Robinson. Those were the days, too, of the baby birds. They were learning to fly, and being in Baltimore for a couple of years was marvelous. Then came '62 and the amazing Mets of Casey Stengel. That was fun. Believe me, that was fun. The National League had been away for 4 years, and the city of New York was always very good to the National League and welcomed them back. It was the year of the Mets and Rheingold Extra Dry. Rheingold bought the rights to radio and TV. J. Walter Thompson was the advertising agency, and they had an executive named Norm Varney. They said to Norm, "Put together a broadcast team." He said, "Well, we want a great favorite of the National League, a National League star." That was Ralph Kiner. They wanted somebody nationally known. Lindsey Nelson was known all over America, more for his football than for his baseball. And they wanted somebody who had been doing day-by-day, play-by-play of the major leagues. And luckily for me, I won that assignment based on 8 years of Major League broadcasting. It was such fun. Ralph and Lindsey and myself said, "Well, the first thing we've got to do is get acquainted with Casey Stengel." That is a pleasure in itself. He was so indestructible, we were with him night and day. And I think after about 10 days of spring training, we were trying to find a potted palm in the hotel lobby to hide behind in order to get some rest because you couldn't wear Casey Stengel out. He was remarkable. He couldn't tell you what he had for breakfast. He could tell you what he had did 50 years ago. And everywhere we would go, it was the same. Around the dugout, you see a number of old-timers. After all, Casey was in his 70s then, and they'd always want to know the same thing. You think I could meet Casey Stengel? And Casey was wonderful about it. He could run up out of that dugout and start chatting with the old-timers. And the old-timers would always say the same thing. You won't remember me, but. One day at Wrigley Field, I asked Casey if he'd come over and say hello to this old-timer. You bet. First thing the guy says is, you won't remember me, but. And Casey said, but what? He said, well, I'm from Kankakee, Illinois, and I own a restaurant. Casey looked at him. He said, no, you don't. He said, you own a diner. He said, I played there in 1910. And he said, you sold meal tickets to my ball players for $5 a week. They ate your diner. And he said, I'll tell you one other thing. If you'll remember, the league folded up in the middle of the week in July, and you still owe me $2.50. We move ahead in Mets baseball history. In 1968, a new manager was on board. His name, Gil Hodges. They finished ninth in a 10-team league, but you could see they were getting better. In 1969, we began divisional play. Some people said, hey, that won't work. We're purists. That can't happen. It might have been the best thing that ever happened to baseball. And in 69, very early in the year, National League teams knew that the Mets were becoming a good ball club. Nobody thought they were going to win. With people like Tom Seaver and Buddy Harrelson and Tug McGraw all coming aboard and all blossoming at the same time, you could tell this was going to be a club. They became my boys of summer. You'll never enjoy a year any more than following the 1969 Mets. They were just terrific. George Grand mentioned the fact that Alvin Dark said there'd be a man on the moon before the Mets won a pennant. Well, and he was right, of course, because in July, the Mets played a doubleheader that day, got to the airport in Montreal, the plane malfunctioned, and they couldn't leave. And Lou Nist, bless his heart, who was the traveling secretary, arranged with the airport to get a television room, and the entire 69 Mets sat around for about 4.5 hours. It was really well worth it. We got to watch Neil Armstrong walk on the moon. And I'll never forget the following winter, I was emceeing a CYO dinner at the Waldorf. Gil Hodges was sitting next to Neil Armstrong. They both had the time of their life. Neil Armstrong's hero was Gil Hodges. Gil Hodges' hero was Neil Armstrong. It made for the most wonderful evenings, and these are the kind of things that baseball provides you with. In '73, an incredible year. The Mets were in last place as we rolled into September. In September, they won 19 games. In September alone of that year, Tug McGraw saved 12 games and won 5. And on the last day of the season, the Mets won the divisional title. And that, of course, was the year of the famous battle cry, you gotta believe. And there was another famous cry that came out of that '73 season from another wonderful Hall of Famer. It was such a crazy season, it went down to the final day, and Yogi told his team, it ain't over until it's over. We still hear that today, don't we? In 1980, the New York Mets changed ownership. Ownership is so terribly important to Major League Baseball, and the Mets have been blessed with beautiful ownership over their entire 33 years. And when ownership changed, and Nelson Doubleday and Fred Wilpon bought the ball club, and they brought in Frank Cashin, who had already built a dynasty to speak in Baltimore, to run the operation. Frank Cashin, a wonderful baseball man, in turn brought in very talented people like Al Harrison and Joe McIlvaine. It took a few years. You don't do this overnight. But by 1986, the Mets were ready to win a championship. I think the most fascinating thing of all about being a baseball broadcaster are some of the moments that you're provided with, a chance to sit in the booth watch these things so beautiful happening on the playing field. For example, in '86, the Mets win, and they won convincingly. They won 108 games. They won by a wide margin. But they were in a death match when they played the Houston Astros of the League Championship Series, and they knew it. That was the year that Mike Scott won the Cy Young. Beat Doc Gooden 1-0 in the first game. Shut the Mets out again in the fourth game. Now they get to the sixth game being played in the Astrodome, and if the Mets don't win that ball game, they have to face Mike Scott in Game 7 in the Astrodome. They probably would not go to the World Series. It was the best baseball game I have ever seen. It's documented. It was the longest postseason game ever played. The game went to the ninth inning. Bob Knepper, a left-hander, an old Mets nemesis, had shut the Mets out on only 3 hits. And it looked like there probably was not going to be any World Series for the New York Mets. But in the ninth inning, Lenny Dykstra came up as a pinch hitter, got a triple. And the Mets rallied for 3 and tied the game. The game goes on to the 14th inning. Roger McDowell pitched 5 scoreless innings, allowed 1 little infield hit. And in the 14th inning, Wally Backman knocked in a run. Now the Mets are finally ahead 4-3. What happened? In the bottom half of the inning, Billy Hatcher hit a home run. The ball hit the screen attached to the foul pole. It's 4-4. Jesse Orosco is on the mound, and Jesse is tired. He had already been used 4 times in the postseason. But Davey Johnson had no choice. It was Jesse's to hang in there and win or lose. They go to the 16th inning. The Mets score 3 in the 16th inning. You say, all right, guys, that's it. No problems now. Far from being the truth. Jesse Orosco, well, his energy tank was on dead empty. And very quickly, the Astros scored twice. It's 7-6. Runners on first and third, 2 men down. Kevin Bass is the hitter. Keith Hernandez and Gary Carter converge on the mound. And Mex says, if you throw anything that's not a breaking ball, I'm starting a fight right here on the field. It goes to 3-2. Baseball is such unbelievable theater at times, you just cannot believe it. But it's 3-2, 2 men down, the tying run on third, the winning run on first, and a dead tired Jesse Orosco reached back, threw 1 more slider, he struck him out. And the Mets would go to the World Series. When you have a chance to work with a moment like that, you have to love the kind of life that the good Lord has provided for you. And it wasn't over, because they go to the World Series, they're playing the Red Sox. This is incredible. They lose the first 2 games at Shea Stadium. Now they are playing Game 6. They are trailing 3-2. They're playing at Shea Stadium. And in the 10th inning, the Red Sox break through and score 2. So the Red Sox are ahead 5-3. The Mets come into bat in the last of the 10th inning, and unless they rally, the World Series is over. And on the message board at Shea Stadium, it said, congratulations to the Boston Red Sox, World Series champions. With 2 outs and nobody on, Gary Carter singled, Kevin Mitchell singled. Ray Knight gets a base hit and knocks a run in. Runners on first and third. Bob Stanley comes in. Now the hitter is Mookie Wilson. Stanley uncorks a wild pitch. Mitchell comes in with a tying run, and then came that famous moment in baseball history when Mookie hit that dribbling ground ball down the first base line, dancing this way, dancing that way, and it danced through the legs of Billy Buckner. Ray Knight came home with the winning run. I asked Mookie about it later. I said, did you feel pressure? He said, no, because the tying run had already scored. The next night, the Mets would win the World Series. Marvelous moments such as these have made this a marvelous ride in baseball. It has been a wonderful ride and such a joy for me to have my favorite Joy Murphy, here in the audience, to have all the members of the family on board. I'm sure it's a day and a weekend that none of us will ever forget. And I can't believe the wonderful attention and detail of the Hall of Fame and the sponsors, the Chemical Bank and IBM, how carefully they have detailed everything out. They just make the whole weekend so absolutely marvelous. Let me say this to you. The wonderful people you meet along the way is what it's all about. And you're not going to meet better people than the people in baseball. There's one other person. Curt Gowdy used to always say, when a game was over and you're doing the recap, this is Curt Gowdy around in third and heading home. With me in New York with the Mets, it's been fun when the Mets win a game to say it's a happy recap. This recap is by all odds the happiest of my entire life. And one parting hello to a wonderful man watching in Hallandale, Florida. He is 96 years old. He took up bowling at the age of 92. He drives his car, he goes swimming every day, and most important of all, he's Joy Murphy's father, Bill Stecker, and with his support and with his love, it means so much to us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to be with you.